Curly, I'm back with another How to Draw video. Today we're going to be learning how to draw boots, but I thought I would do a little something extra, create a nice big winter scene here. Now, I'm going to do kind of like I did with the last video and put down the basic guidelines in a series of steps so that you can hit the pause button if you want to follow along and get the basic guidelines of this figure in place. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is put a curved line here near the top of the calf. And that's going to get us started towards drawing the shape of the boot. Now, you'll notice that I've made her knees look almost a little knock-kneed or like pigeon-toed or something. And that, believe it or not, is based on a photograph of a woman standing wearing boots. Actually, I wanted to make sure that I was drawing real boots and not just imaginary boots. So I found almost like a fashion photography photograph, and I realized actually that this is kind of the shape that, well, at least this one model's legs made, and hopefully it'll look better as we go along. But following here, you get these two lines that are tapering down towards the ankle, and what I want to do here is sort of move down to drawing the shape of the foot so that we can figure out where the ankle is going to be. And what I'm doing is creating maybe 1, 2, 3 lines here that for me form the toe of the boot before bringing it back. And as I do this, I feel like, well, I'm going to have to move that ankle up just a little bit. And if you're looking for guidelines or hints on how to get these lines in the right place, this line here on this one side of the foot is more or less exactly vertical, maybe just a little bit of a tilt to it, but certainly compared to this other one, it has much more of a diagonal feeling to it. So we want to get a proper width here for the ankle. Of course, it's going to be the narrowest part of the boot. And then I'm sort of adjusting this line here. And this gives us the basic shape that we can build all of this off of. Now, I'm going to give this boot a kind of a cuff up here. I hope that's the right word. Keeping my tradition of never knowing the word. The boot cuff, as we call it in the business. And so I'm adding some extra lines out here to have that kind of cuff, you know, folding over and coming out, breaking the contour that we had established there. Now, I wonder if I can even zoom in a little more. I think I will, because this is, you know, this is really going to be crucial about getting all the wrinkles and so forth. So I'm going to shift the focus yet again. Okay, so we've shifted on in here, and the first thing I'm going to do is draw a secondary line here, which would be the sole of the shoe, right in the front. And so kind of following that initial guideline that we put in there, it's not going to be quite as squared off as I had done. And now it's time to follow back. Now there's kind of, you can sort of imagine two sections here. There's the sort of the toe area. And so I'm going to change this line just a little bit right there to suggest this area of the toe as it comes back. And here's where it gets kind of fun or challenging, whichever word you prefer. When we start adding wrinkles to this particular type of boot, and you see them all over the place, where there's maybe excess leather in the boot, and so you get these sort of wrinkled contours that, you know, it's quite deliberate. It's sort of part of the fashion. And what I want to get into here is showing how we can draw these wrinkles. I'm going to start with one line that's coming across like so. And my technique for drawing wrinkles, I mean, it sort of varies, but I'll end up with a lot of sort of, you see how this is like a V shape here? It's like a V on its side. I'll kind of alternate between these V-shaped lines, or checkmark-shaped lines, and these other lines that just kind of come off the side. And you don't want it to be too regular. I mean, I think that's part of the problem that some people have, is it becomes a repeating pattern, so you don't want to have it look exactly the same. but you're kind of playing around and figuring out, well, let me get another, let's say, for example, here, let's get another one of these V-shaped hooking lines right here. And you're experimenting until it just sort of feels right to you. And I don't want to go overboard with the wrinkles, as I have done in the past. So I'm going to probably limit it to that in terms of the wrinkles on this boot. Although there may be, like, let's say there's maybe one up here in the cuff area, the cuff region. And again, I'm going to do, just to show you my technique, a little bit of that V shape or hook. Maybe we should just call it a hook. It's hooking back. And I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of final line work with my black Prismacolor. I kind of promised I was going to do this one boot all real time. So I know it's so tempting to push that time-lapse button, but I'm not going to do it. Stay strong, Mark. Stay strong. Do it all real time, at least for one boot. So this is just final. This is my technique. You out there in YouTube land, you may prefer to use an ink pen for doing final line work. I have kind of gotten hooked on using this black colored pencil for my final line work. And the main thing is that it's a permanent line that can't be erased. And once we've got that in place, we can begin to, erase a little bit of those initial guidelines, very lightly. I'm using just an ordinary pencil eraser. And we kind of got what we need there. It's time, I think, to move on to the shading. And yeah, hopefully we're close enough in that you can follow along with this. Now, I am going to put a very light layer of gray. I'm using a Dixon Ticonderoga, just an ordinary, well, it's better than, I suppose, the ordinary pencil, but available in office supply stores. It's my preferred pencil. You may have some other. Just medium. It's not too hard, not too soft. And I'm putting down a very light layer of gray. Now what I'm going to do, though, is when I get down here to the foot, I am going to leave an area of white as the highlight. Again, this is sort of based on this photograph that I looked at, and I noticed that the light was sort of shining off the woman's shoe, particularly in that area. And I would say, and I've said it before, but here I am saying it again, nothing wrong with photo reference, people. When you want to know how to draw a boot, you want to know how to draw a car, you want to know how to draw anything, start with the real object. And of course, drawing from life is a great way to go. If you have maybe a boot in the house you could look at. But if you don't have that type of boot that you're looking for, just go ahead and find a photograph online and use that as reference, as I would wager almost all professional illustrators do, rather than just winging it. Now you can see I'm starting to add more and more shading here on the right-hand side of the boot. I've decided that the light, this sort of winter light, is coming from the left, and so that's creating, we're adding more and more shadows over here. And my technique in terms of shading is to gradually build more and more, starting light, working at it, and making it darker. Now, I admit that the photo that I looked at was not a girl standing in the snow, but she was standing on a white sidewalk, and so I hoped that it would be fairly similar conditions in terms of the lighting. And if you want to get into what we call reflected light, you could leave a little bit of a whitish area over here on one side. So yeah, why don't I do that actually? I'm going to erase away a little bit here so we can play around with this idea of reflected light. So you can see it getting a little lighter over on that edge. And then the darkest, when you're doing reflected light like this, the darkest area actually ends up being a little bit inside the boot, the area of the boot. It's not inside the boot. We're not shading inside someone's boot. But you can see that by moving the very darkest part of the shadow over just a touch and then leaving a white reflected light shimmer over here on the very far right edge, it makes it a little more convincingly 3D, and this is based on, what happens in real life, especially on a snowy day. You're going to have a lot of reflected light reflecting off the snow and going back onto the edge of the boot. So that is a technique that you can use not just for drawing boots, but for drawing any surface, especially a shiny surface. You're going to get a lot of these sort of extra reflected light areas. But you can't just start throwing them everywhere. There has to be some logical pattern to it, So I've got the major light coming over here. I'll make the boot a little shinier. So I'm straying a little bit from my photo reference, which had not put, as I saw, so much white highlights in this upper area of the boot. Although maybe I think the top of the cuff, this area right up here, had a little bit of that shine going on. But you just keep working at it. It takes time. I mean, you can see I almost become uncomfortable doing a video when it's all real time because I fear that I'm boring everyone to death. Anyone bored out there? Leave a message in the comment section, and I'll know not to do this ever again. But this sort of has taken you through the whole process of drawing this boot. I hope you have found that useful. Now, the second boot is going to be largely the same, so I'm going to do that all in time-lapse. And maybe, depending on how much time we have left, I might be able to give you some pointers in terms of drawing other things on this figure that, of course, we have only very roughly sketched out so far. So let's go ahead and draw this other boot. Alright, well, we've got the basics of everything in place here for the boots, and maybe one last thing I can talk about is that there would probably be a drop shadow of some kind here on the ground, of her, the shadow that her body makes casting across the snow, although generally on these winter days that it's not a super dark shadow. It's the Impressionist painters would often make a sort of a bluish shadow, like it was reflecting the sky or something like that. Let me go ahead, though, and move on to finishing off this drawing. I think my idea is to zoom in on individual parts as I work on them, so that if people, again, some people like to follow the entire pose, recreate the whole drawing that I've done here. If you're one of those people who want to do that, I will give you the opportunity by completing each piece in pretty zoomed in close so that you can see the details of what I'm doing. But it will all be time-lapse, and you'll have to, hit the pause button or whatever if you want to catch up as I speed along through things. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. Alright, well, there's my video on drawing boots. I hope you found it useful, and I want to thank anyone who has supported me by getting any of my books.